I found out the man who hurt my daughter was the same man my wife whispered to at night. You don't come back from that kind of truth. The night started like any other. Madison was upstairs finishing homework, music leaking through her headphones. Chloe was in the kitchen, phone in hand, smiling at something I wasn't supposed to see. I leaned against the doorway, pretending to scroll my own phone. The smell of her perfume, vanilla and rain, filled the room. She laughed under her breath and typed faster. "Who's that?" I asked, half teasing. She jumped. "Oh, just work stuff." Work. At 10:30. On a Saturday. Her phone buzzed again. A name flashed across the screen before she tilted it away, Ryan Blackheart. My stomach dropped. She locked the phone, set it face down. "Everything okay?" she asked. Her tone was too calm, the kind people rehearse. I forced a smile. "Yeah. Everything's fine." But it wasn't. Later that night, when she said she was taking a shower, I went downstairs, replaying that little black heart in my mind. Ryan Blackheart. Who adds a heart to a work contact? At midnight I sat alone on the couch. TV flickering, volume low. Our wedding picture glowed from the mantel, me in a navy suit, her in that lace dress she swore she'd never fit into again. We looked happy then, like a promise that nothing could touch us. The phone on the coffee table lit up again. A message previewed before it disappeared. "Miss you already? Miss you already?" She'd been home all day. Who was missing her? My hand shook as I picked up the phone, but I didn't open it. I knew crossing that line meant something would change forever. Footsteps creaked upstairs. I shoved the phone back down and killed the TV. When Chloe came down for a glass of water, she smiled at me the way she always did, the way that used to melt me. "You're still up? Couldn't sleep. Too much coffee," she teased. I nodded, pretending her lie wasn't burning holes through the air between us. Days turned into a pattern. Late-night calls. Sudden laughter. Locked screens. She started wearing lipstick to get groceries. Madison noticed first. "Mom's been weird lately," she said one morning, pouring cereal. "Just tired," I lied. But even Madison, 16, bright, brutally honest, wasn't buying it. That afternoon, I followed Chloe's car. Not proud of it. Just desperate. She drove across town to a cafe she'd never mentioned. Parked. Waited. Then he showed up. Tall, clean-cut, expensive watch. He kissed her cheek like it was routine. She smiled like a teenager. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They sat by the window. Her hand brushed his. They talked close, like two people who'd already shared too many secrets. From my car I couldn't hear a word, but I didn't need to. Body language tells its own story, hers leaning forward, his little grin that said I've already won. I sat there for almost an hour, every minute hammering through my chest. At one point she checked her phone and laughed. I caught the flash of that black heart emoji again on the screen's reflection in the glass. When they finally stood to leave, I ducked low. She walked out first. He followed a few steps behind, glancing around. Their fingers brushed as they separated, a tiny, practice move. I drove home numb. The road lights blurred into gold streaks. All I could think was how she'd kiss Madison goodnight after this. How she'd crawl into my bed smelling like someone else's cologne. That night I couldn't face her. I lay still, pretending to sleep. She slid into bed beside me, her hair damp from a quick shower, whispering. "Long day." "Yeah," I said. "Long day." She turned her back and was gone within minutes. I stared at the ceiling. In the dark, the silence had its own weight. Every breath she took was a reminder that the woman I loved was now a stranger lying inches away. For a few days I tried denial. It was easier than truth. But lies rot fast. By Friday, her distance was impossible to ignore, texting in another room, deleting call logs, smiling at nothing. So I made a choice. If she wanted secrets, I'd collect mine too. I installed a small tracking app on her phone the next morning while she showered. I hated myself for it. But I needed to know. That night, when she said she was going to visit her sister, I checked the map. She wasn't heading north toward her sister's suburb. She was going downtown. Same cafe. Same lie. I didn't follow this time. I let her think she was invisible. Sometimes the worst revenge is quiet observation, the kind that lets guilt grow roots. A week later, Madison came home pale. "Dad," she said, "can I talk to you?" Her voice cracked. She never sounded small like that. She'd been feeling sick. I told her we'd go to the doctor, thinking it was just stress. Exams, hormones, teenage life. But deep down, something darker whispered that our family was unraveling faster than I could stop it. I didn't know then that Madison's illness would be the thread that pulled every secret into the light. The next morning, Chloe's phone buzzed while she was in the shower. A new message previewed across the screen. "I think your husband knows. We need to be careful." My breath caught. I stared at that text for a long time, feeling the last bit of denial leave me. The water stopped upstairs. Her footsteps started down the hall. I placed the phone back exactly where it was, forced a calm I didn't feel, and whispered to myself, "Yeah, Ryan. I know. And soon you will too." If you've ever felt that cold punch of suspicion, the kind that keeps you awake all night, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. The morning after that message, I couldn't look at Chloe the same way. She moved around the kitchen humming, pouring coffee, acting like the woman I married still lived inside her. But every sound she made felt rehearsed. When Madison walked in, pale and tired, Chloe barely noticed. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't feel good again. Take some vitamins, honey. You're fine." Her voice was sharp, impatient. I caught Madison's eyes, quiet panic there, and said, "I'll take her to Dr. Levine today." Chloe froze for a second. "You sure it's necessary?" "Yeah," I said, watching her reaction. "It's necessary." At the clinic, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Madison's hands fidgeted in her lap. "Dad," she whispered, "I didn't want to worry you." "It's okay," I said. "You can tell me anything." She hesitated, eyes filling. "I met someone a while ago. He said he was older, but he made me feel special. I didn't know it was wrong." Her words hit me like glass shattering in slow motion. "Older?" My pulse roared in my ears. The doctor came in, breaking the silence, holding a thin folder. "We'll need some tests, but she's going to be okay," he said carefully. "We just need to understand what's causing these symptoms." He didn't say the word, but the fear in his eyes told me he had suspicions. Driving home, Madison leaned against the window, eyes closed. Every stoplight I stared at her reflection, so young, so trusting, and felt my chest crush itself with guilt and fury. When we pulled into the driveway, Chloe's car was gone. I checked the tracker. Downtown again. I didn't go after her this time. I called my friend Ben instead, a cop who owed me a favor. "Can you run a name?" I asked. "Who?" "Ryan. No last name yet. Works somewhere near Lincoln Street. I'll text you a photo soon." Ben called back the next evening. "Your guy's name is Ryan Pierce. 42. Owns a marketing firm. Divorced twice. Not exactly clean, couple of complaints for harassment, nothing that stuck. Any connection to minors?" A pause. "Why?" "Just check." When he called again 2 hours later, his voice had changed. "Ethan, you need to sit down. There's a sealed case from 2 years ago. A girl, 17. Her parents dropped the charges." I hung up without a word. That night, Chloe walked in humming again, perfume thick in the air. "Hey, you're quiet," she said, kissing my cheek. I tasted the lie on her lips. "How's your sister?" I asked. "She's fine." I smiled, nodding slowly. "Good." Then I looked her straight in the eyes. "How's Ryan?" She blinked, color draining from her face. "Who?" "Ryan Pierce." Lincoln Street. Marketing firm. 2 divorces. Ring a bell? For the first time in months, she had no script. She just stood there shaking. Ethan, please, it's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, I said quietly. And you're going to stop seeing him right now. She tried to speak, but Madison's voice called from the stairs. Mom? Chloe turned, guilt playing on her face. Madison looked between us, realizing too much too fast. What's going on? I couldn't answer. 2 days later the doctor called. Mr. Coleman, he said. The results explain the symptoms. I'd like to meet with both you and your wife. My throat went dry. Chloe stood beside me, phone in her hand, frozen. The doctor continued. We've traced the infection source. I think you'll want to hear this in person. The room spun. Chloe dropped the phone, face turning white. In that silence, I already knew. The man who'd broken my marriage had also touched my daughter's life. And I was done being quiet. Like this video, if you believe karma never forgets an address. I never knew silence could be so loud. The night after the truth came out, the house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories that wouldn't stop screaming. Every photo on the wall looked like a lie. Every smile, every kiss, every anniversary picture, all of it felt like a cruel joke someone had been laughing at behind my back. Sarah stayed upstairs. She hadn't come down since morning. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I didn't care what she felt. My hands shook as I packed her things into boxes. Every piece of clothing, every perfume bottle, thrown into cardboard like trash. I wasn't crying anymore. Tears were too weak for what I felt. This wasn't sadness. It was fire. And that fire needed to burn something. When the door creaked, I didn't look up. I knew it was her. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. Ethan, please. Don't do this. I turned around slowly. Her face was pale, eyes red, holding a photo of us on our wedding day. I almost laughed. 18 years, I said. 18 years, Sarah. You buried every promise we made. She took a step closer, voice trembling. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I swear I didn't. Stop lying, I snapped. My voice echoed through the room like thunder. Even she flinched. I grabbed the photo from her hand and tore it in half. You didn't mean to? What did you think would happen? You thought you could lie, cheat, and I'd never find out? Tears streamed down her cheeks. She looked small. Fragile. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. She whispered. I lost myself, Ethan. I thought I was helping, I thought it was right, but I cut her off. You didn't lose yourself, Sarah. You chose this. Every secret you kept, every message you deleted, every time you looked me in the eyes and said I love you, you chose that lie. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then she said something that stopped me cold. I didn't do it for me. I did it for family. My head snapped up. What? She looked away, guilt heavy in her voice. You don't understand, Ethan. It wasn't about love. It was about helping my sister. About saving her marriage. She couldn't have kids and I froze. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. She was shaking, words breaking apart. I thought I was doing the right thing. She begged me, Ethan. I didn't want to lose her. I didn't want to hurt anyone. My jaw clenched. You call that helping? You destroyed everything. You lied to everyone, to me, to your own blood. She covered her face, sobbing. Please believe me, Ethan, I didn't want this to happen. I stared at her for a long time. Then I said quietly, You're right. You didn't want it to happen, but you made sure it did. I left the room before I broke something. Downstairs, I sat in the dark, listening to the rain tapping against the window. It was strange how peaceful the storm outside felt compared to the one inside me. That's when the plan began forming. I wasn't going to scream anymore. I wasn't going to beg for truth or forgiveness. No. I was going to make her feel what I felt. Not through anger. through consequences. I started digging emails, bank statements, messages. And what I found made everything worse. She had lied about more than I imagined. Money transfers, secret meetings, things hidden under her sister's name. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a network of lies, built so carefully I almost admired it. Almost. By morning, I had enough to destroy them both. But I didn't send the proof right away. No, I wanted to see their faces when it fell apart. I drove to Sarah's sister's house. The same sister she claimed she was helping. When she opened the door, her smile froze the moment she saw me. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" I handed her a brown envelope. "Your marriage. Your secret. Your turn to deal with it." She looked terrified. As she opened the envelope and saw the photos, the messages, the bank logs, her face turned white. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away, letting the silence speak louder than anything I could have said. That night, the phone didn't stop ringing. Her sister called, crying. Sarah called too, begging me to talk. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and started typing a message to everyone who needed to see the truth: family, friends, business contacts. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was truth. And the truth was all I had left. By the next morning, both families were in chaos. Her sister's husband threw her out. Sarah's parents refused to speak to her. And for once, I felt nothing. I thought that would be satisfying. It wasn't. It was just empty. That's when I realized, revenge doesn't fix you. It just mirrors the pain you already have. But I wasn't done yet. No, not until Sarah knew what it meant to lose everything she loved. Her phone buzzed again later that evening. This time I answered. Her voice was broken. "Ethan, please, just tell me what you want," I said quietly. "I want you to live with the truth." She sobbed. "Please. I'll do anything." I didn't respond. I just ended the call. Because sometimes silence hurts more than words ever could. If you've ever been betrayed by the one you trusted most, hit that subscribe button, because you're not alone in this pain. The night I decided to burn the whole thing down, I didn't feel victorious. I felt colder, like someone had replaced my blood with winter. You think you know what losing everything looks like. You think it's a single moment, a slammed door, a shouted name, a pile of clothes on the lawn. But losing everything comes slow. It's a file upload, a forwarded email, a voicemail that shows up in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's the way a neighbor looks at you differently after the rumor reaches the block. It's the quiet you hear when people stop answering because they don't want to be the next voice on the tape. I had built the scaffold of their ruin carefully. Months of quiet work. Ben helping with his old contacts. Screenshots and bank statements, and hotel receipts printed and arranged like evidence in a courtroom. I had become methodical. Clinical. The man I once thought I was, the father who'd take a punch for his kid, had traded his flinch for calculation. They deserved to see the whole house of cards come down. Not because I wanted to humiliate them, although I admit that part of me did, but because I wanted the truth to land with the force of a hammer. I wanted the little lies to explode into something everyone could see. I wanted to pull the rug so cleanly from under them that nothing could be staged afterwards. No apologies, no half-pleas, no half-baked explanations. It began at dawn. First, I sent a single email to the people who mattered. Not some wide blast smear. Not yet. I sent it to the investors Ryan depended on, the partners who thought he was untouchable. Subject line: urgent review attached. Attachment: 5 years of manipulated invoices, one by one, highlighted. The message was short and surgical. Open. Verify. Decide. Within 2 hours I got the reply I wanted. Phones started ringing at the firm. Meetings were called. The board met. And while the corporate machinery churned, I moved to the personal side. I gave copies of everything to Sarah's sister, Claire. I watched her read the documents at my kitchen table, hands tremoring over numbers, mouth going dry. She looked at Sarah with a mix of betrayal and stunned horror that was almost beautiful in its honesty. Claire had been a pawn in the story Sarah had spun for years, a name to hide behind, a charity of reasons. I didn't have to push her to act. The documents did that. Then I called the one person I knew would never ignore me, the anchorwoman who had once covered a local scandal and loved the smell of a breaking story. She met me at a downtown cafe. I gave her a binder thicker than a Bible. The look on her face when she flipped the pages told me everything I needed. She smelled blood. When the story hit the news the next morning, I watched it unfold in real time. The small, familiar neighborhood outside our window felt suddenly glaring and obscene. Men I used to wave at in shirt sleeves stopped and stared. Texts poured in, some were condolences. Most were questions I didn't want to answer. People I grew up with now opened conversations with, "Are you okay?" As if a human life could be fixed with a polite inquiry. Sarah called. She begged. She demanded. She tried to deny. She tried to explain. Her voice turned jagged on the phone, thin with panic. I listened without pity. "Ethan, please. You have to understand," she said. "You lied," I replied. It was a fact. No more, no less. "Please, we can." "Don't. Save it." I cut the call short. Enough words had already been spent. The thing about taking everything away from someone is you inevitably give up something as well. I knew that when I started. I knew the price. But until the reckoning, I didn't know what the sacrifice would feel like when it was payment on the ledger. It hit on the 10th day, when the school called. Lily, Sarah and my daughter, had always been a quiet one. She was polite in that brittle teenage way, always careful not to be loud. She loved reading in libraries and slipping notes into the pockets of her best friend. When the counselor asked to speak with me, I expected a talk about grades or behavior. I did not expect the silence that came first, followed by a 3-minute pause and a voice that sounded like someone holding back a tide. "We need to discuss your family," the counselor said slowly. "There have been rumors. Students are asking questions. Lily, she's been withdrawn. She's been skipping lunch. We're concerned about her privacy, her well-being." My chest went tight. It was like getting hit with a physical blow, worse, because this one was self-inflicted. I had wanted them to feel the consequences. I hadn't truly considered the collateral. I went to the school that afternoon. Lily looked up when I walked into the counselor's office and, for a second, I saw everything I had worked for reflected in her face: confusion, disappointment, and an exhausted, premature resignation. Her eyes were hollowed out in a way a kid shouldn't be. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay. But how do you tell a child that you destroyed her life so the lie would stop poisoning everyone? That night she didn't come home. She stayed at Claire's. Sarah begged me to let her go. "She needs time," she said. "She's fragile." Fragile. The word landed like a knife. Sarah had helped orchestrate a secret that blew up 2 families. She used the language of care while wielding betrayal like currency. The small ironies of that, their casual cruelty, were poisonous. As the days moved into weeks, Ryan's world collapsed. His firm bled clients. Lawsuits followed. He tried to scramble, to placate his board, to spin stories about mistakes and naivete. But the evidence was a slow-acting poison. His public image, the carefully curated charisma he sold, curdled into a litany of text messages and invoices. Men who had shaken his hand now pointed. Ryan called me once. He was desperate. He left messages where his voice wavered in ways that were ungainly and raw. "Ethan, you don't have to do this," he said in one voicemail. "We can fix this. I'll talk. The message cut off. I deleted it without listening to the end. I learned how to keep my distance from the thing I wanted most: sight of catharsis. You'd think watching their faces collapse would be the peak. But the emptier I became, the harder it was to feel anything but fatigue. There was no movie moment where I glared and walked away triumphant. There was instead the quiet of a house emptied of trust, the steely assurance that I had traded my future for a verdict. The sacrifice arrived on an ordinary Wednesday. The bank called first. "Mr. Coleman, your account is on hold pending audit." I listened to the man speak and felt my stomach drop. For the last month, in the tracks of the storm I'd unleashed, I'd signed off on a few transfers and moved assets. I did what you do when you want to be untouchable. But I had never intended to sacrifice everything. Not like this. 2 hours later, a message from my firm. "We need to discuss your role. There are concerns about association and optics." My phone went from vibrato to shrill. I felt the floor tilt. I had expected public backlash. I had not expected them to come for me. I had forgotten that in their panic, people will cut whatever rope they need to save themselves, including the colleagues who had no part in the crime. The same board members who scrutinized Ryan's ledgers now looked at anyone remotely connected, me included. The old adage is true: when a building caves, the rubble takes everyone beside it. That week I lost clients. The firm pulled a major contract. They said it was about reputation risk. My name circulated in the margins of articles, in forums, in whispers. "Did you hear? Yeah, his wife. Must be rough." People came by with sympathetic looks and left with apologies soaked in practical distance. I felt it all: the loss of next year's income, the quiet freezing of career momentum, the subtle exclusion from business events where I used to be welcome. But it wasn't just the money. It was the shrine of normalcy I'd been building: weekend soccer games, PTA meetings, 5-year plans, and watching all that unspool because I decided truth mattered more than convenience. I'd set a match to a tablecloth, and the fire took the china as well as the napkins. That was the price. My sacrifice: a career, a reputation, stability. A comfort I had assumed was a given. I took that loss willingly. I told myself it was payment. It was necessary. I wanted them to feel their lives crack like thin ice. And they did. But the hollowing took me too. I started sleeping in the guest room after Lily left. The house seemed smaller and sharper. When Sarah would come down in the morning, she moved cautiously around the space like someone who suddenly found herself living in a crime scene. The pantry had become a map of absence, jars lined up, the coffee tin untouched. Small things you don't notice until they scream. I didn't visit Ryan in the end. There was no need. Watching a man squirm on the news is less satisfying than you think. Satisfaction rarely comes at the moment of exposure. It comes later, in the little confirmations that the world sees what you saw. It came when his phone stopped ringing. It came when his name became a punchline. It came when the woman who had once styled herself as untouchable was suddenly the subject of pity and scorn. But the arrow I hadn't expected to find lodged in my own chest was this: the way children carry fallout. Lily had been the unintended casualty from the beginning, a life threaded into a lie she never asked for. Maximize the truth, they say, and collateral damage will creep in like mold. No formula accounts for the softness of a child's trust fracturing. One evening, Claire called me. "She's gone," she said. The line trembled. "Lily left town. She's with an aunt in the next state. She can't, she said she needs space." Space. A vacation from the grief I had created. Claire begged me to try to talk to her. To apologize. I tried, but the words felt false. What do you say to a 16-year-old who has to choose which family to keep? I had wanted to be the man who fixed things. Instead, I had set a clarity in motion so sharp it could cut bone. I had no bomb. The weeks bled into months. Sarah disappeared from the neighborhood after a night of too many cameras and too few answers. She moved into an apartment with packed boxes and the echo of her shoes. Claire filed for divorce papers that read like a ledger of betrayal. Ryan's firm dissolved into lawsuits and settlements and market whispers. My phone rang less. The silence thickened. And then, one cold afternoon, I went to the place I'd promised myself I would never return to, the old house where our family had first learned how to be a family. It had been on the market for months. The for sale sign had nearly blown off in a windstorm last week. I stood in the driveway like an intruder in my own memory. I walked through the room slowly. There were ghosts in the wallpaper. A crayon mark on a hallway near the stair, Lily's tiny handprint from when she was 3, stopped me. I touched it. The paint felt the same. I felt the same. Time had not smoothed anything. Time had just rearranged the grief. At the top of the stairs, a letter sat on the banister, folded and weighted by a single smooth stone. My name was on it, in handwriting I recognized and feared. Ethan, it began. I sat. I read the letter 3 times. The paper was cheap, but the words were meticulous. You did what you thought you had to do. I don't know if I would have blamed you when the truth came out. I don't know if I could have kept pretending. But what I know now is that revenge is not the same as justice. I know now that there are costs we can never fully pay back. I wanted to tell you that I left because I needed to breathe. I left because living at home became learning to move around a wound. I left because Lily needs a place where she is not a headline. I left because your storm pulled at things that did not belong to you. I do not want your pity. I do not want to watch you fail. I left because this was the only way I could make sure my daughter would one day remember us as people, not as a scandal. Sarah. The paper trembled in my hands. For the first time since this started, I felt the ache that is not rage but a raw, open grief. The letter continued, asking for nothing and offering the only thing left to offer, distance. Claire had already taken Lily across state lines. Sarah wanted to be alone. I closed the letter and felt the cold roll through me the way deep water does. I had wanted them to lose everything. I had secured that outcome. They had lost everything in ways that would strip them bare. But in the ledger of consequence there was a line I hadn't considered, a line where I also lost something vital. I lost my daughter's presence. I lost the future where we would go to graduations and weddings together. I'd traded my legacy for a verdict. There was no trophy to hold up. There was only the silence of an empty home, and a name on a letter that did not want my pity. That night I walked to the river. The city lights hummed across the water. The wind tasted like metal. I sat on a bench and let the cold wind take whatever warmth I had left. I thought about law and money, about the nights I spent cataloging lies, about the faces that fell when the truth landed. I thought about Lily's small handprint on the wall. I thought about how revenge had felt righteous and then hollow. I had sacrificed my career, my comfort, my place in the same circles I once moved in. I had done it to secure a kind of justice that was clean and black and white. But life doesn't work in black and white. People who were never meant to be in the crossfire bled too. The next day, I made a phone call I didn't want to make. I called Ben and gave him instructions to clean up what I could. There were still legal loose ends to tie, subpoenas, inquiries, audits. I agreed to cooperate, to testify, to hand over every scrap. I knew I would have to give the story to the right hands. That meant nothing if it left my daughter exiled. I would take the penalty that came from my reveal if it meant the truth stayed put. Word leaked that I was cooperating. Reporters wrote about my fall from grace as a kind of poetic symmetry. They printed that I had lost clients. They speculated about whether I would ever work in the same circles again. I watched the obituaries of my former life scroll across feeds and felt nothing but numb interest. The world had a way of making spectacle out of moral arithmetic. Months later, there was a court settlement. Ryan pled guilty to fraud. He accepted a sentence and a fine that would take years to pay. He was no longer a figure anyone envied. Sarah's sister moved away. Claire finalized her divorce. My name was still in the margins. The press called it closure. People who did not understand the scale of what we had gone through wrote think pieces about accountability and sacrifice. And Lily? She came back for one visit. The first time we saw each other after everything was a Saturday with brittle sunlight. We met at a diner in a town that felt scrubbed of its own history. She slid into the booth across from me. For a moment she just looked at me. Her eyelids fluttered like someone trying to remember a face they had only known in dreams. "Dad," she said finally. The word felt small between us. Like the paper it was written on. Lily. I tried a smile, and it felt like a costume. We talked in fragments. About school. About the book she was reading. About nothing, mostly. She ate pancakes and picked at the syrup. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her why I had done what I had done, and how I had watched my own life collapse because of it. But what would that teach her? That sometimes truths have fires that burn the wrong people? That you should always take the moral high ground no matter the cost? No. She looked at me and asked the thing that matters most. Do you forgive Mom? I inhaled. It felt like a physical act. I don't know, I said. The answer was honest. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible. But I also knew we were not built of a single answer. Forgiveness might come in parts. It might come one afternoon at a time, or on a Tuesday in the drizzle when we talk about a book and find laughter again. She nodded slowly. Okay. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand for a second. It was the smallest of gestures, but it was a bridge. I left the diner after that with a heavy chest and a new understanding. Justice can be cold and precise. It can close cases and change reputations. But justice is not the same as restoration. Justice leaves a map of scars. Restoration is a different continent entirely, one you only reach by walking the hard miles. I had paid a price. I'd sacrificed career and calm and, for a while, my daughter's daily presence. I had the satisfaction of truth. I had the ruin of those who had betrayed me. I had also the knowledge that the ledger had collected a sum far greater than I had intended to pay. I had to live with that. On the day the final settlement was published, I sat on the roof of our old house and watched the city move. A neighbor down the street put out a tray of seedlings like nothing had happened. Life goes on. People mow lawns. People post photos. The world keeps going. I thought of the first photo of Lily I'd ever held, her tiny fist wrapped around my finger. I thought of all the small, ordinary moments that had once made my life rich. I wondered if repairing them was possible. I thought about Claire, and Ryan, and Sarah, and the shape our lives took after the lie. I stood up and folded the last page of the final settlement into my pocket. That paper was a victory in the narrow sense. It was proof that the right things were made visible. But as I walked down the street, the cold of that night in winter still lived under my skin. It sat with me like a permanent tenant. I had chosen to pay for the truth with my life's comfort. I had made the trade. I would carry the cost. 2 months later, Lily moved back into town. Not into our old house. Not yet. She rented a small apartment above a bakery. She called me sometimes. Not always. Sometimes she ignored my messages. She was rebuilding in her own way. I learned to respect her distance. I learned to answer when she reached out. I learned to be present without pushing. The final image of the story, the one I carry like a coin you turn over in your hand, is not one of triumph. It's a small thing, a paper napkin at that diner, Lily doodling a little star at the corner while I stirred my coffee. She drew without looking, like she was stitching a map. I watched her hand move and felt something like hope. Not the bright, blinding kind, a quieter, more stubborn flame. I had won the case. I had lost the easy life. I had sacrificed a career and a reputation and a straightforward future to bring truth into the open. I had paid that price knowing it might mean living in the margins for a while. But the cold justice I enacted did its work. It ended a life of manipulation that would have burned more than our family eventually. It kept other people from being caught in the same web. That was a dark consolation. If you're listening to this and you're deciding whether to burn the house down to expose a lie, think first about what bridge you might have to walk back across afterward. Truth heals wounds, but it can also expose the bone. Sometimes the cost is more than you can afford. Sometimes the cost is exactly what you're willing to pay. I traded a lifetime of comfort for a single, brutal clarity. It changed everything. It left me with a life that was quieter and rawer, with a daughter who might one day forgive us both. That will have to be enough. If betrayal ever tore your world apart, share this. Because sometimes the coldest justice is the only kind that can make a liar truly pay.